Okay, I show 9 a.m. Do you?
It is 9 a.m. We are on.
Love it. Hello.
Did you make it to Caribou this morning? Is that what I see?
I did. My Keurig is broken, which my son absolutely teased me about. I was like, the Keurig's broken. He's like, really? You're upset about that? Like, that's a thing this morning?
Were you like on the ground, like crying? Like
I was more like, I have to do something fast. I was more like an urgent plea of, yeah.
You're like, I'm an addict. I don't really care. I just need my source.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So quickly I ran to Caribou. Yeah, exactly. So I've been out and about. It's a beautiful day too. We're so fortunate. It's a lovely summer day.
It is. It's thunderstormed early this morning.
Yeah, it's a little humid, but it's gorgeous now. So
okay. So today we are talking about CMAs and how we price our listings.
Right. There's so much that goes into it. You and I were just talking a second ago. There's a lot of data and there's a lot of ways to interpret data, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
and seasonality as well, because we could, for example, a listing that we just sold, I had given a price to them, like a rough estimate in January, and it was about $30,000 less than what we ended up listing it for, because who knew that the market would be as crazy and wild as it was.
It is, yeah. And what people don't understand is how timely it is. Like, it changes quick. So oftentimes at the point the general public has heard something, it's already changed, right? Like, it changes so quickly. And so those of us that are watching it on a day-to-day basis are usually more in tune to stuff that, again, the general public is probably going to feel a couple months later, maybe a few months later, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not only data as well, but sometimes we have the ability to be in another listing within that same neighborhood, and we get to see direct competition as well. And that can be, I think that is very effective for us when pricing things.
Well, and don't we have this conversation with sellers? Like, here's the data today. Here's the value today. And we think about what we can control, which is like the condition of a house. Really, that's what we can control. We can't control if the neighbors go on the market, right? Like, all of a sudden we may have a value, but if we have a sale nearby that sells for, higher, lower, whatever, that will be a direct comp for us. So we need to all of a sudden strategize differently, right? Very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so can you think of any specific examples or a moment in time when you walked into a home not knowing what you were going to price it for, and then having to readjust at the last minute due to other market fluctuations?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that happens frequently. It's one thing when you go into a house and somebody wants to list ASAP, right? Like, we come in we come in knowing some information, but until you walk in the door, we don't know what that house looks like inside, right? One thing, we don't know the condition. We don't know if they've added bedrooms and bathrooms, and there's questions we can ask, but we're just looking at the general data, right? There's things that we walk into and we may say, oh my gosh, this is a brand new kitchen in here. I didn't realize that. Wow, that really helps your value some. Or we may go in and realize there's a ton of deferred maintenance that we weren't realizing. And we may have a seller that isn't equipped to take that on. Well, we're going to have to apply that in the adjustment, right? So those are the types of things that where the eyes of a realtor in a property that's where you're going to really find out what the value is. Yeah. But yeah, there's times where we adjust quickly, right? You walk in and you're kind of thinking you might know a general number, and then go in and be like, okay, right? We're off. We're going to need to crunch numbers in depth, which we do anyways.
I have a nickname. I don't know if I've ever told you my nickname before. Maybe you've heard it. I am called the Nose Nazi.
Oh, very good. Yeah. That's an important piece too, right? It is.
I can literally walk into a home and tell you if it's got moisture issues, if a seller has smoked in there, how many pets they have, how many teenage smelly boys they have.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? People are like the senses, all the senses come into play when a buyer walks into the property. And to your point, some people's senses are more enhanced than others. And especially when somebody's lived in their property for a long time, they may become kind of immune to some of that, right?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, I once had a listing where, oh gosh, this was like 7 years ago now, where they had 31 cats.
No. Wow. Really? That is something else. Oh, wow.
We were bleaching cement, and you just have to, like, it's in the drywall, it's in the fabric of the furniture. We didn't know what to do. And we go on the market and we think we're priced low enough. And, you know, sometimes we have to adjust because of feedback as well. So sometimes that is another pricing factor that sometimes, you know, a seller might say, my house is worth this. And absolutely, I think, you know, if everything was right, we would totally get this. But then the buyers come in and they have like this different expectation of like a neighborhood or a home or a unit. And we get feedback that comes in, and then we have to make secondary adjustments.
That's right. So, the first valuation is what we see from the data, right? Well, we can tell from the data that's out there. Until you put a house out on the market and let the public come in to view it, it's just like any product from that, you know, you put a new car out on the lot, you price it. Do people want to buy it, right? That price might be great. They might snatch it up. It might sit for a little bit, right? And there's a part of that until you put it out there and see what the general public says about it, you don't know for sure. It's worth what, like we always say this, it's worth what somebody's willing to pay, right?
It's totally. Yeah. And I was just thinking that raises a good point. We used to be able to kind of like beta test our properties doing like broker opens with other real estate agents, but now with 0 to none market time for everything. And people, I don't know about you. I sometimes worry about doing broker opens in such a tight market like we have now because of off-market offers and how enticing they are. But at the same time, you know all too well that you will get a much better deal by going active on the market.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't want to leave money on the table or opportunity on the table. And unfortunately, a pre-market sale is a fantastic route for some people, right? Some that is just I call it the path of least resistance. If you can get X amount of dollars from one specific person and you're going to be happy, that's great. And we make those things happen. If you want to get top dollar, which you don't know what top dollar is until you market to the masses, right? Because somebody might be willing to pay $3, but somebody else might be willing to pay $3.25. You don't know that until you put it out to the world, right? So yeah, to your point, that's something every seller has to weigh. And that's one thing that talking to professionals is helpful about, is walking somebody through the pros and cons, because there's a lot, right?
There are an absolute lot, aren't there? Okay, so I'm selling my house. I am a seller. You come into my home. Typically, what have you done up to that point before walking in? Because you know that I'm sitting there waiting for a price from you. Right.
Well, I tell you what, I always prep a seller too to say, hey, I'm going to come in with some general information. And what that general information is maybe the old MLS listing, looking at the property tax records to see square footage, bedroom, bathroom count, just to kind of get an idea, as much information as we can about that property. Look at a market analysis of the neighborhood. So what are the houses going for in that area that seem to be a similar size and style, that type of stuff. I always prep a client to say, though, until I get in and see your house, everything I say is very preliminary. Right? To get that really in-depth data, what I do then is go see the property, go back into MLS, into that data, and pull it apart even further. So, but getting the stuff that we as agents have access to in MLS, that's key, right? Then eyes on the ground. You've got to get in the property to really see it and know the pros and cons, right? Again, okay, like you said, the smell test, the deferred maintenance, updates, what does this look like in there? How desirable is this area? What is it close to, good or bad, right? We can look at a property online and think this is really, really great. Oh my gosh. And then go there and see that it's right next to a gas station, right? Like had we not looked at the neighborhood, we might have said, okay, there's value here, but you know what? That's going to be a hindrance for some people. We just have to make account of that, right? So, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but I always said until we see it with our own eyes inside on all levels, it's a very preliminary number.
That sounds really exciting. And actually, I have a little monster crawling on the floor here. But that sounds really exciting. And if I were a seller, I would be like the very next day calling you and saying, okay, what did you think?
Well, and let's talk about this, right? Zillow. Everybody goes to Zillow. I should say everybody, but the general public, that is a tool that most people go to, right? And they'll say my Zestimate is fill in the blank, right? It's really interesting. And oftentimes people are waiting to find out if that number is right. That I think is probably the biggest indication of what a seller thinks their house is worth oftentimes. And sometimes that number can be right. Sometimes it can be grossly off, right? But it's interesting. You're right. People are like, what is it? It's exciting to find out what your product is worth.
Here, hold on. I have a co-host.
Yay. Hi, Max. Oh, I see the top of a little head.
He came in and he brought, there's a chair. I have a desk and we have chairs on either side that we paint with. And so he brought his chair over to my side so he can sit next to me.
Okay, nice.
So, so that price, I know that is like the low hanging fruit because it's really easy to access that information online. But then they also have the tax value as well. So now they're and usually that's much lower.
Those numbers are very far apart.
Yeah. And so it gets very confusing. What do you say up to that?
Well, we talk through tax values. Oftentimes you're going to look at, and this is a very huge generalization, but usually those numbers are a year or two behind, right? So when we're looking at the numbers and assigning value, we're looking at timely data. So what has happened in the market over the last 30, 60, 90 days? Property tax value is going to be assigned so it's back numbers. And usually as a whole, it is usually well below market value. Not always. Some neighborhoods change, tax values make different increases and stuff year to year. But just know that's what your taxes are based on. That's it. That is not your market value.
And I always tell people that actually that number runs off of a city budget. It actually, it has somewhat to do with your value as well, but it has to do with a city budget. And
people have seen property tax increase go the percentage go up, but their value not stay, and vice versa. It is. There's just analytics and math that goes into it that is beyond what we assign value to. So it's a marker. It's a marker to look at, but that's it.
Okay, so now you've come in my house, you've got my number, you've seen my stuff, you go back and you do your analyzing of everything. And I am waiting for you, hopefully patiently, but I can already tell that I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
Do I call writing on it? Do you call me? How does this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how I prep a client is say, hey, I'm going to get back to you within 24 hours with a report, which we call a CMA or a comparative market analysis, and a net sheet, right? That analysis is going to say, what is around your area? What are the strongest comps that we can come up with based on location, number one, bedroom, bathroom count, size of the house, right? We're really looking at as specific data as we can. We assign a price per square foot. That's important. We want accurate measurements. And then we're getting a range, right? We're getting a range in there. that next piece in terms of like if somebody's going on the market right away, then we say, hey, if you were going to list today based on what else is out there, right? What is your competition, right? So that you strategically price yourself to be the best option out there. That is then the number that we share. And very important to note that it's up to a seller, right? The seller ultimately chooses the price. We're just going to provide the data and the guidance to help out, help interpret it.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of responsibility. And that also sounds really kind. Do a lot of agents allow the seller to price the home?
I sure hope so, right? I mean, I think it's one of those things where I'm sure you've run up against this too, where a seller may say, hey, I just want to try this number. And it might be higher than what we think the house is worth. They have the right to do that, right? So we may say, hey, okay, our data isn't quite supporting that. If you want to give that a shot, that's your choice to do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to watch feedback and we're going to have some markers. We're not just going to let a house sit out there for a long time with no activity, right? So in the end, we would never tell somebody you have to list at this number, but we would say, this is what our professional recommendation is. What would you like to do?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, and different personalities. You seem much more amicable and friendly. I have a hard time sometimes with what are those strong personalities?
Yeah.
I just tend to like shut down. So, do you come across sometimes when you're pricing a home and maybe how do you overcome those strong personalities when pricing a home?
Sure. So here's the thing. The data is the data. The data isn't emotional and the data doesn't care. The data is just numbers, right? So when we go back and we look at data, it's math. It is what it is. So sometimes there's a point in which we just have to separate emotions a little bit and talk about goals, right? Your goal is to sell the house. How do we get you to that goal? If we have a really high price, are we going to be able to sell? But the neighborhood says no. The neighborhood says this is the max. So a lot of it's just talking about what the goal is. Do you want to have your house sit on the market? Are you okay if it takes 60 days? Because that's way too long in this market, right? So talking through what to expect, what is the goal, and then helping somebody, come to the right decision or the right decision for them. Doesn't mean it has to be my right decision, but what are they most comfortable with?
I love all those answers. And I'm so glad that I asked you that question because
it's a good question.
It is all just black and white.
Numbers are. That's one thing I love about them. They don't lie. The numbers are the numbers. So.
Okay, hold on one moment. Okay, honey, we're going to say goodbye now, okay? Do you want to say goodbye real quick? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to let you go. And you enjoy your beautiful day. If you could just stay on 1 second, I'm just going to end the broadcast. And if you guys have any questions, please visit kateybean.com. And that's Katey, Katey. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.